Hello, and welcome back to Music 110. In this lecture, we will be exploring effects chains, or another way to think about this would be ways to change the sound once it leaves the track. So we'll be looking at ways in which you can subtly or drastically modify the sound that's coming out of the track. So whatever audio you put into your digital audio workstation, the original audio is now going to be modified using various effects that do various modifications on the sound, on the resulting sound. So, in order to understand this, we're going to talk about effects chains as they fit into the larger signal flow of a digital audio workstation. We will talk about VSTs, which are a file format of effects that are third-party programs that we will add to our digital audio workstation as plugins that we can then insert onto a track to change the sound that's coming out of that particular track. We will download some VSTs onto our machines. And after that, we will take a look at 3 examples of effects. We will discuss each in terms of theory. In other words, we'll talk about, what exactly is this effect doing? And then I will demonstrate that theory in practice. So we'll head back over to the digital audio workstation, and we'll see how each of these effects changes the resulting sound. And you might get some ideas on how to apply those changes in creative ways. And the 3 examples that we'll be looking at are filters, various filters that we can put onto sound, distortion, and digital delay. These are just some effects that you will be able to use. So, in other words, when we're talking about these 3, these are just 3 examples among many that you can explore. And so I'll be encouraging you to just be open-minded and experimental in the ways that you explore and experiment with the VSTs that we download. Okay, so let's get started. Last week, or in the last module, we were talking about signal flow. And we came to understand how the sound file that we drag and drop into a digital audio workstation and then becomes represented in the audio track in the form of a waveform, then the resulting sound can be modified within the track itself through several techniques. Fades that we can put onto the audio clip itself. Pitch changes that we can put onto the audio clip itself. Time stretching that we can put onto the audio clip itself. And then we talked about the automation of volume and panning. So, as a reminder, the changes that we perform on the audio clip itself, meaning the fades and the pitch shifting and the time stretching, happen before the changes that we write in to the automation of volume and panning changes. So in other words, when you were experimenting with fades and automation changes in the last module, you probably will have noticed that when you put a fade on an individual audio clip, which would, let's say you're fading in, and then let's say you automate a volume change, you probably will have noticed that the fades happen first before the volume change. So if you have a slow volume increase over the course of several audio clips that are all fading in and fading out, we still hear a slow increase in sound rather than these distinct fades that happen on each of those clips. And the reason I'm emphasizing this here is because we should be thinking about when we insert a change, we should be thinking about what change happens when within the larger signal flow. So the changes that we put onto an audio clip are going to happen first. The changes that we put onto an effect will happen after that. So the fades that you put onto an audio clip happen before the effects that we put onto the audio clip, or onto the audio track, I should say. Okay, so as a reminder, if we're thinking about signal flow, here we have a diagram from last week or last module, and we're thinking about the sequence of all of the phases that an audio signal goes through in an analog recording studio. And so the input from the microphone will go through the mixer, through the mixer channel into the master fader and then out to the amplifier. Now, as that signal is going through what we call the channel strip, all of the knobs that you see over there, that you see on each of those channels of the mixer, that is where the effects are going to be inserted. So, in other words, we're going to be putting virtual effects onto those knobs that you see, quote unquote, on the mixer, and those knobs will be the changes that we're making. So we have to imagine like the signal as it follows this path all the way to your speakers. And as we know from last week, in digital audio workstations, the signal path flows just like in analog mixers from the top to the bottom. And over on the right here, we see a little screenshot from Luna, but this is also how the track channels are set up in all digital audio workstations, and you can see the order in which the signal is going to follow the order that the signal is going to follow from top to bottom. So input, utility, tape, console, inserts, sends, output. And the output really is going to be the modifications, the slider and the knobs of volume and panning that we see on the track. And the output is going to go where? To the main. So we're going to be putting effects into the inserts slot on these tracks. And the effects that we're going to be using are going to be VSTs. Now, we're using VSTs because the main digital audio workstation that I'm demonstrating on in this class is Luna, which doesn't come with very many effects. If you are using a DAW other than Luna, it could be that there are native effects that are already a part of your DAW. This is definitely true for those of you who are using BandLab. So I'll be using effects from these two free VSTs. However, the effects that we'll be looking at this week are very standard foundational effects. So if you find an effect that is already part of the DAW that you're working with, if you're not working with Luna, go ahead and use that instead. You do not have to use one of these. However, if you download these VSTs, this will work with your DAW unless you are on a Chromebook, where you will have to use whatever effects are part of your DAW, i.e. BandLab. That's just part of the Chromebook thing. All right, so what is a VST? A VST is a virtual studio technology, which really is just a file format where you can code any sort of audio device into a package that digital audio workstations almost all digital audio workstations will recognize. So it's a way to create something that is cross-platform. The two VSTs that I'm going to be having us download this week are a bundle of effects by Melda Audio, and then one effect by Valhalla called the Valhalla Supermassive. You can see the download links here on the slide. I will also post the download links to I'll post the download links to the Brightspace page. As far as downloading these VSTs is concerned, once you download them and install them, they should install to the appropriate folders on your computer. And once that happens, you need to download and install these first and then open your DAW. And they should show up once you search for them within your DAW. If you have any problems with discovering VSTs that you've downloaded within your DAW, please contact me. So first, make sure that you download these effects and install them. And now we're gonna talk about how to use some of them. And the first type of effects that we're gonna talk about and demonstrate are filters. So, what is a filter? A filter is you can kind of think of a filter as like an eye patch, where you are able to use the patch to select out certain parts of the overall plane of view. In terms of audio, what a filter does is it's going to let certain sounds go through, and it's going to keep other sounds from going through. So a filter is going to pass only a selected portion of the frequency range to its output. So we have all of the sound that's going into the input of the filter, and it's going to say, okay, I'm going to let this stuff through, and I'm going to not let that stuff through. And the way that it makes a decision about what to let through and what not to let through is based on what the frequency is, or how high the sound is, or how low it is. So in this sense, we can think of filters as subtractive. So we have all of the sound that's coming into them, and they decide, what should we get rid of? What should we let go through? What should we hold back? What should we let pass? And the frequency range that they pass, that they let through the gates, so to speak, is what determines the type of filter. So a low-pass filter would be a filter that let the low sounds through the gate. A high pass would let the high sounds through the gate. A band pass would let the sounds that are that are around a certain range through. So it would stop the low, whatever's lower and whatever higher, but whatever is right around that certain, whatever's near the gate, it would let through. And a notch filter would say only whatever is not at the gate can go through, but whatever is at the gate cannot pass. So maybe it would make a little more sense to look at the diagram to the left. A low-pass filter would be the diagram that we see on the top left of the 4. In other words, the sounds that are being passed through, if these graphs go from low to high frequency on the bottom axis there. So we would know that the top left graph is a low-pass filter because the sounds that are being passed through are on the low side. The graph to the right would be a high-pass filter because the sounds that are being let through are on the high side. The graph that would be to the bottom left would be a band-pass filter because the sounds that are being passed through are centered around the gate or the cutoff frequency. And we would know that the filter to the right, bottom right, is a notch filter because wherever the cutoff frequency is, that's where sounds are not allowed to go through. Okay, so the frequency that divides the band pass, that divides the pass band range from the stop band range is called the cutoff frequency. So all of these graphs, you can find the cutoff frequency as the line that divides the stop band from the pass band. And it is a specific frequency. It's a specific rate at which the air wiggles. So at whatever that line is where you can see the stop band being divided from the pass band, that is the cutoff frequency. And the cutoff frequency, then we should think of this as wherever that cutoff frequency is, filters always have a slope from the cutoff point. The steepness of the slope can vary, but there will always be a slope. And the last point about filters is that where the cutoff frequency is, a filter can add resonance to the cutoff frequency. So in this sense, a filter can also be additive, not just subtractive. It can add sound, not just take it away. Okay, this may all seem really abstract right now, so let's hear filters in action. And the way we're going to do that is head over to our DAW. Here I am in Luna, and what I'm going to do is add some filters to this drum break. So this is the drum break that we were all working with a couple weeks ago. Cool. We're going to add some filters to this drum break. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to switch my view over to the mixer view. And this is just easier for me to see where I can add my inserts to this track. On this particular track, where I have the break beat, I'm going to open up this inserts window, this inserts tab. I'm going to click plus. Now, when I've got a lot more plugins than you will have, so if you see a lot of options here for me and you don't see them on your end, you won't see a lot of these options on your end because I've added a lot more plugins to this machine than you will have. But you should see, if you've already installed the Melda Audio VSTs, you should see the Melda Production option over here on the left. I'm going to make that drop down. And then we see here all of these options for various effects from this plugin bundle. And what we're going to use to experiment with filters is the M equalizer. So if I just double click on that, or I guess single click, this is what we'll see here. There are a lot of things going on with this equalizer. We're just going to be focused on learning about filters. So when I put this effect onto this track, this new window popped up. And this window is going to be the effect and all of the different changes that I have available to me within this effect. So what we see here in front of us in this window is we're seeing like a graph of all of the sound information that's going to be coming out of this track. Now I'm about to press play and we will see a graph of the sound, all of the different frequencies that are coming through this track. Here we go. So you might have noticed as we're watching the automated graph emerge over this window, you might have noticed that, when there was more bass, like more bass drum and electric bass happening, the shape of the overall frequency spectrum was heavier on the low end, and when it was all hi-hat, it was heavier on the high end of the spectrum. So I'll play it one more time just so you can see that. So pay attention as you're listening to the overall shape within this window. So it kind of, you could see it kind of, you can actually see the dance between the hi-hats and the bass and the kick and the organ in the middle. Now, we're going to start putting filters on here that can take out some of those sounds, like the low sounds or the high sounds. And in order to do that, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this number 1. I'm going to double click on it, and that will turn it on. Now, this filter is live because I double clicked on it. If I right-click on it, it should open up a new pop-up window. And this will allow me to make decisions about this particular filter, this number 1 filter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a high-pass filter. In other words, all of the sounds that are higher than the cutoff frequency of the filter are going to go through, and all the sounds that are lower than the cutoff frequency are not going to go through. So I'm going to move this window over just a little bit so we can see. So you can see this filter number 1 is the one that I just turned into a high pass filter. So all the sounds that are to the right of that number 1 are going through. All of the sounds that are to the left are not. Although it's not that simple, because you can see the slope here. And you can think of this slope as like how much sound are we subtracting or adding. So the cutoff frequency of this high-pass filter right now is 52 hertz. And so that means that sounds that are at 52 hertz are going to be reduced by whatever this is, like about 3 decibels. And sounds that are at 20 hertz are going to be reduced by 18 decibels. But let's say I just move this high-pass filter really higher up to now 2,000 hertz. So now sounds that are 2,000 hertz will be reduced by 3 decibels, and sounds that are 544 hertz will be reduced by 18 decibels. But remember, where we had it before, about 15, like that's totally reduced to like negative nothing, you know? So that's one way to think about the importance of this cutoff frequency. So that line that vertical line that you see moving as I move this filter back and forth is the cutoff frequency of the filter. Whatever is above that cutoff frequency is going to go through. Whatever's below it is not. So let me press play, and I'll move that filter around so you can hear it. Okay, so yeah, I think you could hear that pretty clearly. Now, let's look at some of these some changes that we can make over in this this filter window. Again, the changes that I'm making within this band, it's called band settings over here, are just changes that I'm making to this one filter. Within the equalizer, we can add up to 6 filters, all on top of each other. So we're just affecting one filter right now. So things can get complicated pretty fast. Let's just look at a couple of changes that I can make here and that I can experiment with. One would be the slope of the filter. You can see here that I can increase how quickly the cutoff happens. So let's just, maybe I'll move the filter right about to here, so we can hear the difference between these different slopes. I'll press play, and I'll go from 1 all the way up to 10 on the slope, which would be increasing how extreme the slope is. So here we go. So you can hear some pretty drastic differences as I change the intensity of the slope of the filter. In other words, how quickly we reduce the volume of the sounds that are on the stop band side of the cutoff frequency. All right, so next let's talk about, we've talked about the slope of the filter, we've talked about the cutoff frequency and how to move that around. Last, I'm going to talk about this this knob here on our filter, which is the Q, and basically the Q is going to, it's short for filter coefficient, and what it's going to do is it's As I turn the knob to the left, you will see that it changes the slope of the filter, but it's also going to increase the it's going to increase the gain around the cutoff frequency. And well, let me just play it so you can hear it. So by increasing the Q, I am increasing the amount of sound that's going to be passed through at the cutoff frequency. I'm not just like subtracting sound, I'm amplifying sound around the cutoff frequency. Now, this aspect of filters is actually like a really, really prevalent way that, for instance, EDM DJs will use filters in very expressive ways. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna play this breakbeat. I'm gonna increase the Q on the filter to get it to resonate at the cutoff frequency, and then I'm gonna start moving the cutoff frequency around, and you will hear. The important thing here is that you hear where the cutoff frequency is. When I start moving the cutoff frequency, you'll hear that actual frequency, that actual tone coming through in the music. And I think as soon as you hear it, you'll say to yourself, "Oh, yeah, I've heard this before in tons of EDM tracks." So here we go. So yeah, you can hear that, like it's how it's adding. It's not just taking away the lower frequencies. It's adding this sort of it's increasing the gain around that exact cutoff frequency to make it sort of pop through more than the other sounds. And you can do the same. You can do the same technique rather than using a high pass filter. You could use a low pass filter instead. So all I did here, we're still using filter number 1, but I switched it from high pass to low pass, and you can see now the purple is going to be the stop band. What is not purple is going to be the pass band. In other words, all of these sounds are going to be reduced or completely removed. Let's press play. Now that trick with increasing the Q of the filter, for some reason it's not letting me increase the Q of the filter on low pass 6. Okay, let's switch. There we go. Okay, so seems that these high pass and low pass 6 won't let you make a resonant filter. I didn't realize that until just now. So if you want to make changes to the resonance of the filter, don't use low pass 6 or high pass 6. Just use low pass or high pass. All right, so we're on low pass right now, and what I'm going to do, basically, I'm going to take us through the same process, and I think you'll even this trick with the resonant filter on a low pass filter will be even more familiar to you. Yeah, so that trick, that sort of like, a filter sweep over the drum part in an EDM track with some resonance on the filter. I kind of put an extreme amount on this just to emphasize here, but that's like a classic DJ trick right there. All right. So let's just hear a couple more of these filter types, and we'll move on to the next effect. So I'll left click here. We went over high pass, low pass. Let's try a band pass filter. So you can hear how with a bandpass filter, it's only the sounds that are that are near the cutoff frequency on either side, and everything else is stopped. As I increase the Q, it tightens up. It tightens up around the cutoff frequency, and as I decrease the Q, it widens around the cutoff frequency. In other words, the pass band increases. And then if I switch this filter to a notch filter, it will invert that. Great. All right. So that takes us through filters. Let's head back over to these slides, do a quick review here. We just went over these 4 types of filters: low pass, high pass, band pass, notch. In each case, you're thinking about the cutoff frequency of the filter, and the type of filter is going to let you know what frequencies are being reduced or removed and what frequencies are being passed. So a cutoff frequency of 100, say 100 hertz, if it's a high pass filter, everything above 100 hertz is going to go through, everything below is going to be taken away. If it's a low pass filter, it's reversed. Everything that's below 100 hertz is going to go through. Everything that's above is going to be taken away. And the cutoff frequency, if you increase the Q, you can increase the resonance around the cutoff frequency. Wherever that frequency is, it will resonate. You will hear the filter itself. And this is a super prevalent trick in EDM. Next, let's talk about distortion. So what is distortion? We talked about this in previous modules where we were talking about redlining. And when you increase the volume on a given channel beyond the system limit, what happens is that the system won't calculate values that go beyond that limit. So, and what we end up with is clipping. And we see a diagram here of a waveform. On the left, let's say that the waveform has 0 gain on it, and that gives it what we would call headroom, the space between the loudest points of the waveform and the system limit. And what we see on the right, you can imagine, let's say we increase the gain of the waveform so that the peaks of the waveform go beyond the system limit. And the way that the system is going to calculate that limit, whether it's digital or analog, is just going to be, I can't go any further than this. So I'm just going to stay at the peak. So if this were in analog, we would be thinking in terms of a speaker. So a speaker can only push back and forth, can wiggle back and forth a certain amount. So once you push the speaker to its limit, it's just gonna, let's say the speaker can go back and forth half of an inch. Once you've cranked it as loud as it can go, once it hits that half an inch, it's just gonna stop there until there's less energy going through the signal. So in order to hear this, let's take let me just demonstrate this in terms of a single simple waveform. In order to do that, I'm going to use this program here, Pure Data, which I'm not asking you guys to download or look at. This is just to demonstrate this phenomenon. So what you will see here is once I start increasing the volume with this fader here, you'll see the wave shape. I'll increase it so that we just have a simple, very smooth sine wave. Once I increase it beyond its point of headroom, you'll start to see the tops of the wave start to what we call square off. So you'll see the tops of the peaks of the wave start to get flattened off. Watch as they get flattened off and listen to the sonic result. What you will hear is something that becomes more fuzzy. So what I was just demonstrating was, if we're just to look at one single pitch, if you're to push the gain of that pitch beyond the headroom, you square off the peaks of the waveform. And what that does is it changes the overall sound. It increases the amount of harmonics. In other words, what the result of these squared off peaks is to hear these much higher fuzzy sounds, fuzzy aspects of the sound start to enter, and it becomes more complex. So this is exactly how a distortion pedal works on a guitar. So what we see here is two waveforms, one on the bottom, one on the one on the bottom would be the clean guitar sound, so a recording of a guitar being played, and the waveform on the top is the same recording, right? The same performance passed through a distortion pedal. And what you can see is that same idea of the sound wave both being squared off and becoming fatter in a way. So if you look at these individual waveforms where you can see the attack and you can see the decay, if you think back to when we were working on those Hamlet recordings and you were looking at the shape of individual words. So when we look at the bottom waveform, the gold, it's much easier to see these shapes. And as a reminder, what we see on top is the same performance passed through distortion. So what distortion does is it both like flattens off those peaks, but also increases those tails. And so we end up with like just a lot more sound. So in addition to increasing all of those harmonics, that like fuzziness, distortion also increases the loudness of the quieter sounds. Okay, so let's look at an example of that in Luna. I'm going to go back over here, and we'll be still using the same breakbeat that we've been using. And what I'm going to do is, instead of using this equalizer, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to remove it. And this time I'm going to add, instead of using the equalizer, I'm going to use my Melda. I'm going to go into the Melda production free bundle. And this time I'm going to use the M Saturator. They have a couple of distortion plugins. You should experiment with all of them. I'm just going to demonstrate using this one, but they have a couple that are fun to work with. All right, so how did that happen? I think I double clicked and ended up selecting the ring modulator rather than the saturator. So I'm just going to click once. There we go. All right, so here we have a saturator. I'm going to and what I'm going to do is I'm going to well, let me start by saying this. When we're looking at effects, whenever you see a knob that says wet dry or dry wet, wet is the effect. Dry would be the signal that's going into the effect. So if we go completely dry, we won't hear any effect. If we go completely wet, we'll hear only effect. If we go somewhere in between, it'll be a mix of the original sound and the affected sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press play, and I am going to enable this harmonic distortion module here. I won't be doing anything with the compander. That's for later. We're just going to be changing the gain here with the harmonics, and I'm going to be playing with how much sound is on the input, and I'm going to probably be decreasing the output. And the idea is to increase the distortion, but not create redlining on my master mix. So what I want to do is make the sound of the drums sound distorted, but I don't want to actually distort my output. So I'm going to press play. Just follow along as I start to experiment with some of these knobs and listen to the difference in the sound, and then I'll talk about how it was that I was able to change the sound in the way that I did after I press stop. All right, so dramatically different than the original recording, right? So, uh, what was going on here exactly? Um, Now, one thing that you might have noticed is that there's a really important relationship between the gain and the input here, not these two knobs. So I can really crank the input to this saturator plugin, and the more basically the one way to think about it is, like I can increase the gain and then change the way in which the waveform is being clipped, and so as I increase this, it's just like as we were looking at before, when we were looking at how I increased the gain on that single sine wave, and it became more like a square. That's what I'm doing with the input here. I'm like increase the amount of squareness to the output. Similar with the gain, and there's sort of like a complex relationship between all of these numbers here in the gain box, where I'm able to bring out different harmonics that are resulting from the distortion by changing these levels. My advice to you is just use your ears. So pay attention to whether you're redlining or not on your track, and reduce the output as necessary to keep from redlining. But you can kind of like you can just modify, or just ride these knobs and change these values until you get a sound that is interesting to you. As I was switching through these modes here, this is affecting the way in which it's really kind of affecting the shape of the clipping. So, so we can have like a soft clip to a hard clip, and so the more that the more that the shape of the clip is squared off, the more sort of gritty the result is going to be. Okay, so let's review here in terms of like talking about distortion. Distortion is essentially squaring off waveforms by pushing the audio input beyond the system limit. And this could be bad, oftentimes is, but if you're using it in an intentional aesthetic way, it could be good. So distortion can be very expressive, as I think we just heard with how I was changing the sound of the breakbeat. And what you're doing in terms of changing the sound is you are squaring off the waveform. You are saturating the sonic space. All right, last effect that we're going to talk about today is digital delay. Digital delay is an echo. And the way it works is diagrammed here on this slide. So we have the input to the effect, the sound that's coming in. And the sound that's coming in is going to be passed straight through. That would be what you see there as the direct signal. But then it will also be delayed by a certain amount of time. And then that will also be passed through. So it's an echo. In other words, if I were to do this just with my voice, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say signal, and then I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to pass it through on a delay. It might be something like signal. So So it's an echo. Now, we can increase the number of echoes by feeding the output of the delay back into itself. And that's called feedback. All right, so that is the digital delay. In order for this to make sense, let's hear it in action. And to hear it in action, we're not going to use a Melda audio plugin. It could be that you can find a digital delay in your Melda audio bundle. For some reason, it did not download for me. So we're also going to be, so the other VST that I asked you to download is the Valhalla Supermassive, and that's what I'll be using to demonstrate this. And this plugin is awesome. I can't believe that it's free. Okay, so this is going to be, we're going to be dealing with a delay here. There are a bunch of knobs here, and the defaults that when you open this for the first time, the defaults, I'm going to get rid of a lot of those just so we can hear the delay. There are tons of interesting presets. I encourage you to just experiment with the different presets and just play with the knobs and just hear, just listen and wait and just try to find something that you like. What I'm about to do is turn down a lot of these knobs just to remove them from the effect so we can just hear what delay is and talk about a couple ways in which to use it. But again, when you start exploring this plugin, I recommend trying out different presets and different modes and finding a sound that you think is interesting. But just to demonstrate a simple delay so we understand what digital delay is, I'm just going to reduce all of the mod knobs to 0. We're going to start with no feedback, no warp, no mix here. So since there's no mix, that you can think of this mix knob as our dry wet knob. And when I press play, we'll just hear the breakbeat. Okay, so I'm going to press play again, and I want to increase the mix a little bit, and you'll hear that delayed echo start to enter. All right, now I could also change the time of the delay, so how long it takes for us to hear that echo. Right now it's 300 milliseconds, or about a third of a second for us to hear that echo. So I'm going to play again, and then I'm going to change the delay time so we can hear the how long it takes for the echo to happen. All right, so the last thing that I will demonstrate is the feedback. So, in other words, the number of echoes that are going to repeat back through. Right now, we should have just one echo, right? So I'm going to just press play and then stop. Dun, 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 right? I'm going to increase the feedback. Decrease the mix here. I'm going to press play and then increase the feedback so we can hear that. All right, so I increased the feedback almost to 100%. In other words, it's just going to keep feeding back over and over and over and over again. And really all that does is increase the number of echoes. Or you could think of it as like the echoes go back into the loop. Now, there are all sorts of things that you can do with delay. You can use it rhythmically. I think maybe you could kind of hear, you could kind of figure out like, get a feel for the tempo of the music, and then you can kind of figure out the time of the delay and get it to kind of sync up to create some interesting rhythmic effects. But you can also use it more like just atmospherically, which is kind of the direction it was going in just a second ago as I was increasing the feedback. You can kind of create washes of sound rather than rhythmic pulsing. So digital delay gives you a huge range of creative possibilities, from rhythmic to textural changes that you can put onto the sound. And again, like I said, this plugin, though it's free, it's awesome. And I really encourage you, when you start experimenting with it, to both start the way that I just started, kind of turning these knobs down the way that I did, but then just like try out some different modes and different presets, and then just start turning knobs and just see what you hear, and see if you can find just see what results you can find until you find something that is interesting. In the case of each of these, be thinking about how you can use these in your sound collage project. How do you want to use distortion in your sound collage project? How do you want to use digital delay in your sound collage project? How do you want to use filters in your sound collage project? And when you return to looking for sounds to put into your sound collage on freesound.org, that would be one thing to be considering as you're listening. Like, what sorts of changes can I put onto this sound? So, for example, if you're like, okay, I'm looking for the sound of a lion roar. And part of the reason that you're looking for a lion roar is like, oh man, what if I put a lion roar through a massive delay? Or you could say, what if I put a lion roar through a high-pass filter? Could I make it sound like a whispering lion roar? Get rid of all of the body, all of the deep sounds of the lion roar. What would that sound like? So that's another, now that you're starting to learn about these effects, you can keep the sorts of changes that you can affect to a sound in mind when you're looking for sounds to incorporate. All right. So just a reminder that this is all part of your creative project. So think about how to use these in a creative way. Try to find ways to use these musically, experiment, let them lead you into places that you had not imagined. That's one of the most amazingly fun things to do, or I should say, amazingly fun things about creating music in this way, is to just start turning knobs until you hear something that you had never imagined before, and you're like, oh my God, this sounds so cool. So we have now entered that phase of the process in this class, getting to a point where you're like, oh my God, this sounds cool. I don't know why, but I love it. So see if you can get yourself to that point with any of these effects that I demonstrated, or other ones that you find in the effect bundle that we downloaded, and let me know if you need any help with any of this. Have fun. I can't wait to hear what you come up with.